Tuesday, January 26th of 2021. This hearing is being held as required by the provisions of Chapter 131, Section 40 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth, an act relative to the protection of the wetlands as most recently amended. Notice of the time and place of this hearing was published in the Advocate on January 21 of this year. It was also posted in the town clerk's office. Persons wishing to be heard will be called in the following order. And first order of business, minutes for approval from the January 12 meeting. I reviewed, I see no changes necessary. Anybody else want to make any changes?
No.
To the minute?
Motion to
Accept. Thank you, Everett. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Rick. To going in order across my screen, Ryan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Everett? Give me a wave, say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Heidi?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Minutes accepted as presented. Next, meeting mail. Merrill Lee, do we have any meeting mail?
Nope, nothing today.
Okay. Okay, on to old business. We have an NOI from PJ Keating Company, 72 South Main Street. Now we have a file number that is SE001-0558. A notice of intent was filed by PJ Keating Company for property located at 72 South Main Street, map 15, lots 15 through 18. The applicant proposes to grade the eastern slopes of the existing silt piles located at the rear of the PJ Keating Quarry property. Applicant is represented by Douglas Vigneault of PJ Keating Company. Plan name is Site Plan of Land at 72 South Main Street in Acushnet, Mass, dated December 21 of 2020. And Mr. Vigneault, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the way we left the last hearing was that a file number had not yet been issued, so the commission, with our approval, extended the hearing date until this evening. Other than that, I have nothing to add from the previous discussion that we had, which was seemed to be quite favorable. So we're open to hear from others. Thank you.
I will ask for comments from our agent first. Merrill Lee, over to you.
Yes, I was out there today, and it looks like the silt, it has run right through the wetland line, right into the wetland. So I honestly don't see how you can keep those piles there and not have it running into the wetland. That's a really steep slope, and it's running right down in there and then continuing on probably 100, 120 feet past the wetland line. So I would suggest that they move them back at least away from the wetland.
I want to offer Mr. Vigneault or anybody else from PJ Keating to respond to that particular comment.
Sure. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we realize that we're within the 100-foot buffer zone with the piles. And we agree to that. Yes, sir.
But it seems that we have an issue with, so Merrill Lee, are you stating that based on a visit out there today, that there is still runoff from those silt piles into the wetland? Is that correct?
Huge amounts of runoff, yes.
Okay.
Merrily, sorry, Alex Whiteside, Town Council here.
Yeah.
Merrily, was there also some concern raised today about the delineation of the wetland lines? Did you have someone from Conoco there as well?
We did. We had Mike Toohill with us from Conoco looking at the line. The flags that we examined looked okay, but it's a long line. There's a lot of flags, so it wouldn't hurt to have it peer reviewed, certainly.
So I'm hearing a couple of things. So I'm hearing flag line seems okay, but we're recommending a peer review from both our agent and seems like town council's leaning that way. But I'm also hearing about runoff from the silt piles into the wetland. So I'm curious as to what mitigation is recommended or suggested for dealing with the silt that's already in the wetland. And that's going to be on top of what's already happened, what the proposal is for the silt. With this silt, if I'm hearing that there's a strong suggestion to move those silt piles a little, that complicates things and it changes what we talked about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it
So,
does. But it's, you can't miss it. There's lots and lots of silt in the wetlands. For like I said, probably 100 feet past the wetland flags into the wetland.
Marilee,
It's,
is this new since we were out there 3 or 4 months ago?
There's more since we were out there. Yes, where the silt pile has washed out. Remember that big hole there that was, it had eroded away. It's especially bad at the bottom of there, and it goes right into the wetland.
Before I ask for a response from anybody on the PJ Keating side, I'm curious if there's anybody else on behalf of the town, whether it's town council or departments that would like to comment on this. Mr. Hannon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was at today with the site visit with Marilee and Mike Toohill from Conoco. And we actually had better access to the silt pile today because the top was dry. And we were able to actually walk right out to the breach. And there are blue wetlands flags almost right at the toe of the slope of the silt piles. We, the Board of Health, are having a problem with wind-blown dust. The silt piles are pretty high and they're not stabilized. And it's a double-edged sword here. So we're definitely in favor of reducing the height of the silt piles and moving them out of the buffer zone. I don't see how you can control the silt off of those piles. They're so close to the wetlands, unless they were drastically reduced in size. And a 3-to-1 slope or a 4-to-1 slope, but just the lack of maintenance out there has really had some big impacts on the wetlands.
Anybody else from the town before we ask for a response from anybody representing PJ Keating? Okay, Mr. Vigneault, Mr. Leger, anybody else, would you like to respond?
Mr. Chairman, I'm James Tatro from Thompson Listen Associates, also here on behalf of PJ Keating. And I just wanted to just quickly respond in regard to the suggestion by Mr. Hannon that slopes need to be 3-to-1 or 4-to-1. That's just not really true. Again, I mentioned this last time. At the last meeting, we did a plan for it's lots actually at 10 Fortune Boulevard in Shrewsbury, has a 55-foot high slope, which was stabilized just fine. It's been in place 7 years now at a 2-to-1 grade. That was done with erosion control matting. We're proposing here to use first an organic spray to give a medium for things to grow in, and then the Flexterra high performance flexible growth medium, which is, again, it's pretty much a state of the art and can be used on is rated for use on even a 1-to-1 slope with simply a much greater application, but we're proposing it here on a 2-to-1 slope. There's no reason to think, it seems to me just an arbitrary assertion to say that you have to go to a 3-to-1 slope or a 4-to-1 slope. Again, what we're proposing to use is rated for use on a 1-to-1 slope, and we're going to be proposing to apply it to a 2-to-1 slope. So I just wanted to touch on that point.
Great, thank you, Mr. Tatro. Mr. Hannon, looked like you wanted to respond.
If I could, and not to have a tit for tat, but there's nothing arbitrary about my statement. PJ Keating in the first court stipulation was required to stabilize the silt piles. They stabilized the silt pile to the southeast of this one that we're talking about tonight, and that effort failed miserably. And if you want to ask your agent about that, she can confirm that. So if their first stabilization attempt didn't work, I don't have any faith in their second one. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm just not sure. Mr. Hannon didn't explain how he came up with the 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 grade as somehow being the choice. I just didn't hear that there. Could he please explain?
It wasn't a choice. It was a statement of what I'm familiar with using at landfills that I closed in this state. And the maximum slope was a 3-to-1 slope with an erosion control mat, with a drainage layer, with a vegetative support layer, which is missing entirely on the slope that Keating already stabilized. And that slope failed miserably. So I don't have any faith that the success would be any better on this pile. And this pile is hard to access and it'd be very hard to monitor. And I think that the failure to monitor these piles speaks to the severity of the violation. Had they really been monitored monthly, like Keating says they do in all of their permits, it wouldn't be this bad.
Could I ask, I have to confess, Mr. Chairman, my ignorance of this other area to which Mr. Hannon refers, but was that area attempted to be stabilized at a 2-to-1 grade with the applications we're proposing, or was it something different? And if it was something different, may I ask why is skepticism about something different applied to what we're proposing? I'm just not sure how that follows.
For the sake of time, I'll let you have this discussion with our peer review engineers offline. They're going to be peer reviewing whatever gets done with that pile anyways. So we should just continue the discussion, and you folks can handle that on a professional level.
Anybody else with questions or comments before I have my own thoughts on this?
Well, I am
Now that
curious,
everything's
is it the same stuff that they're going to hydroseed with, that they hydroseeded the last pile with?
So I guess I'll follow up on that, Merrily, by asking, because I honestly don't know this. Is there another pile already there at PJ Keating that was hydro-seeded? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I'm asking about that other pile. Yeah.
So Mr. Vigneault or Mr. Robinson, can you answer that, or maybe Mr. Tetro? Is there another silt pile there that's already been hydro-seeded?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there is. We did use a different formula on that, and I think that's James's point. There is some rutting. We agree with that. It's clear that we've had some rutting outside of any jurisdictional areas. That rutting does cause some silt to fall, go into some other areas surrounding the piles, but well outside of any jurisdictional area. The only reason that we did not put straw bale silt fence at the bottom of the silt piles right now, they would be out there right now. However, we were told to not do anything out there until such time as we received an order of conditions. We could have band-aided that approach by simply putting in a layer of silt fence and straw bales, and that would have been a stopgap measure. Again, we're not arguing that we're not within the 100-foot buffer zone. It's up to the commission to determine what you would like us to produce in order to have a plan that removes material from the 100-foot buffer zone and or also examine silt migration. That plan has not been produced, and we will need some time to produce that plan. And then make a determination as to the efficacy of removing any migrated silt from the wetland, which has actually grown in size. So clearly the silt is not impacting the indigenous wetland species there. So, you know, we would need to do some additional homework with respect to those items. And we're prepared to do so, but we can't very well speak to what we would expect to be a solution to the issue at this time, other than recognizing the fact that we will remove material from the 100-foot buffer zone.
Anybody have a question or comment on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Alex Weiss said if I could. It seems to me that, you know, a peer review would be beneficial here, both to determine the accuracy of the delineation for purposes of, you know, figuring out what fill, if any, has actually migrated into the resource area itself, because that fill certainly would need to be removed. You can't leave fill in a resource area. That's a violation. And then, you know, also to review whatever sort of mitigation measures are proposed within the buffer zone to prevent future erosion and migration into the resource area. It seems like a peer review. It sounds like PJ Keating is willing to kind of reevaluate things, but I think a peer review would be beneficial as well. I don't know what their thoughts are on that, but.
It's entirely up to the town to have a peer review. We welcome it. In fact, Mr. Karen, who's on the line as well from Karen Environmental, actually stated that in his wetlands report. So he says that no one always agrees on a wetland line, and that third eye view is acceptable. So we have no problem with that.
Mr. Karen, did you want
Chuck,
to?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Chuck, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I guess I haven't heard anything that I disagree with that much. I think the line is fairly, especially in the critical areas, is fairly distinctive out there. I did flag that 11 or 12 years ago. I thought it went before the commission at that time. And the line in most areas is, over that time, is stayed the same. In one area, it is either the wetlands moved or my interpretation was a little different. The wetland is expanded up closer to the piles in one area, and that is actually in an area where the wetlands are on top of the sediment, whereas I don't think it was 10 or 12 years ago. So it's kind of that is a tricky area because you have the Phragmites growing that'll spread everywhere. It's growing on a soil that has no soil development, but there's some evidence of modeling, but it's just so unnatural. So that's the only place I saw where I'd say there's a significant depth of sediment in the wetland, is where the wetland over the last 10 years has expanded onto sediment that wasn't considered wetlands 10 or 12 years ago.
Well, clearly, if we have sediment that's in an area that's at or beyond a flag line, that's going to have to be removed. And did you have a question? I saw your hand up.
I did, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vigneault, the town's using Conoco, and I understand that you know Mike Toohill, so would you folks agree that Mike Toohill's qualified to do the peer review?
I have every respect in the world from Mike Toohill. I don't know how often he's been delineating wetlands in his advanced years of consulting. I used to delineate wetlands. I no longer do it because it's a difficult job, but I don't know how often Mike delineates wetlands these days, so I would expect you to have to ask him that question.
Mr. Toohill, would you like to respond?
Sure. I still frequently delineate wetlands, and I have just not just myself. I've got other folks on my staff that would assist with that, but I still actively delineate.
Thank you.
So the short answer is fine. Yes, I have no issue with Mr. Toohill, and I expect that between Mr. Karen and Mr. Toohill and others, we can come to a conclusion. Yes, thank you.
He spoke highly of you, so I thought you know him. Thank you.
Well, I do know Mr. Toohill, and I speak highly of him as well, as I indicated at the onset of my sentence. Thank you.
I appreciate his mutual professional respect. Makes for a good conversation and a good product. Mr. Leger, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, frog in my throat there. I just wanted to quickly address something, and I don't know if Mr. Karen's going to be able to give us a really comprehensive answer to this at the moment, but Attorney Weisheit said something earlier, and I think, Mr. Chairman, you more or less alluded to the same idea that any silt that has reached the wetlands would have to be removed. And it's my experience in having dealt with situations like this many times over the years that there are instances where it's conceivable that actually going in and removing silt could do more harm than good. And that's not to say that that would be for the entire area of wetlands, but it might be that in a situation like this, it makes sense to go in and remove silt to a point, and then going beyond that, you're actually going to do more harm than good. So I don't know that we need to make a decision on that tonight. I don't think, frankly, that we're probably in a position to be able to really answer that question definitively this evening. I think, as Mr. Vigneault mentioned earlier, the consultants need to do their homework and certainly talk with a peer review consultant, and we can hear from all of them. But I did just want to suggest the idea that it may ultimately be that it makes sense to actually leave some of what's out there in place. And I don't know if Mr. Karen has a different opinion or the same opinion or anything to add to that, but I just wanted to put that out there because I'd heard that mentioned a couple of times.
Thank you, Mr. Leger. Mr. Karen.
Yep. I agree with what was just said. There are some of the projects I've been involved with where we've had to go in by hand with wheelbarrows and 5-gallon pails to remove the sediment. I've been more concerned about the damage that was getting done doing that than the impacts that the silt was having. But that really is going to be dependent on the exact depth of it. If you just got a thin coating on top of everything, or not, just a dusting, sometimes there's not much you can do about that without disturbing the whole area, and it has little impact. But if there's significant depths of sediment accumulated in areas, then it makes sense to get it out. So I think it needs to be addressed on on each specific location and what's going on the ground.
I agree with all that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I will, and I agree with all of that as well. And some more homework needs to be done. And it's that's where we're at right now, right? So as far as determining the locations where best to remove silt and leave the existing wetland vegetation alone, I think is will be the the discussion that needs to be had and come to a consensus. So we have absolutely no problem with that, and we can move forward from there. Given the fact that the wetland vegetation, and again, Chuck, please, if I say anything incorrectly, please correct me. But where I've seen some of the silt migration, and as compared to the adjoining wetland locations where there isn't silt, there's very little difference in the vegetation. that is as far as, both density and type. So again, those are the things that we need to work out, and that I hope that we can accomplish over the next month or so. I would expect that this hearing will be continued in order to have the consultants and our experts have these field visits and discussions and come to a mutually agreeable consensus, like I say. So, with all, Mr. Chairman, that's where I think PJ Keating would like to leave it this evening, and then any direction that the commission has with respect to how we go about this, we certainly welcome. Or should it be better left to how our expert consultants determine that to occur, as Mr. Hannon alluded to. Thank you.
Well, it seems to me that a combined effort or a cooperative effort with Mike Toohill, Chuck Karen, Agent Kelly should be reviewing both flag line and whatever infiltration there has been of extra soil or silt runoff into the wetland area would help us get to our next step and make a rather informed decision about this. Have I left anybody off that combined group, or have I missed a step? Mr. Leger, looks like you want to respond. You taking yourself off mute.
Oh, no, sorry, I don't have anything to add. I think that sounds about right, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Marilee Kelly, what do you think?
I agree. I think it makes sense.
I've not heard from anybody on the commission. Does anybody in the commission have questions, comments for these many people that have joined us tonight? Please, Everett, the floor is yours.
I think what we're talking about needs to be done by professionals, and the committee that we kind of just assigned the job to should be set forth to look at this for.
Okay. Guess I'll ask Marilee and our town council, do you see anybody else that needs to be on this 3-person team right now other than Toohill, Karen, and Kelly?
No, I think that will do it.
Okay. Anybody from PJ Keating, any more thoughts on that trio?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I mean, if that's the team that will be going out and investigating, then I may well take part in that as well, if that's allowable. Right now it's 2 against 1, so I might like to make it 2-2. That's fine with us. I would request that we have the hearing extended for 4 weeks from this evening, so that we might be able to accomplish that.
That seems reasonable to me. More information, the better. Any other questions or comments from the commission?
No.
Any other questions or comments from town board members? In the audience, and I recognize just about all the names here, but is there anybody else that has not spoken that has a question or a comment for either side of the discussion? All right, I'm gonna go back to my other screen for a minute here, just so I can. Being said, I will entertain a motion to continue for the 4 weeks, which will bring us to the second meeting in the month of February, to allow Mike Toohill, Chuck Karen, Agent Kelly, and perhaps Doug Vigneault to review the flag line, review silt runoff into the wetland, and make recommendations how to proceed while doing the minimal amount of damage to that wetland resource. Everybody, you make that
Yes,
motion?
I am. Table for 4 weeks, please.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Heidi. Any further discussion, any recommendations on changes to my wording on this?
No.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Please.
will you be, this will be in the minutes of the meeting, so we'll get that verbiage exact as you just suggested?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, sir.
yeah, our Joanne, whose title never quite describes the amount of work that she does, will review this broadcast and make sure that the wording is accurate. Okay. So in that case, going across my screen, we have a motion, we have a second. I think we're done with discussion. Ryan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Everett?
Yes.
Heidi? And that's unanimous. Thank you all for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
And,
Mr. Chair.
PJ Keating, thanks to the commission, and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you all very, very much.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Over there. Karen. On to the other item. So we have new business. We have an NOI from the town of Acushnet DPW for Guyot Street. We do have a file number, even though on the agenda it does not say that. We do have a file number. It's SE001-0559. Joanne, thank you for that last minute text message. The notice of intent was filed by the town of Acushnet DPW for property located on Guyot Street, map 25, lot 10AK. The applicant proposes to construct 2 stormwater retrofit practices, in parentheses, dry swale and sand filter, close parentheses, on Guyot Street and in Riverview Park, adjacent to the Acushnet River, with the primary purpose of reducing bacteria and nitrogen loading into Buzzard Bay by implementing the proposed stormwater retrofits. The applicant is represented by Michelle West of Horsley Witten Group Incorporated. Claim name is Buzzards Bay Watershed Stormwater Retrofits, dated December 31 of 2020. And Ms. West is here on the call, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I am the project manager for this project from Horsley Witten Group, and Amy Ball is here with me as well. She is our senior wetland scientist and assisted with much of the permitting. And Rich Clater is here as well as the president of our company. And I'm going to let Amy start it off tonight.
Amy?
Good evening. For the record, Amy Ball from Horsley Witten Group. As was read in the announcement, the project does consist of the construction of 2 stormwater retrofit practices, which are designed to improve the water quality overall in Buzzards Bay. The project itself is grant funded through the Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program. It is one of the final results of a watershed study that identified a number of sites across the Buzzards Bay in watershed within a number of towns. And this site was selected as one of 3 of the high priority sites to be taken to design and construction and permitting on that order. The other 2 sites are in Wareham and Fairhaven. And these consist of a sand filter that is located in Riverview Park, as well as a dry swale that is opposite from the intersection with Buttonwood Lane. Only the sand filter itself is actually falling within jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. And the resource areas here are riverfront area associated with the Acushnet River, land subject to coastal storm flowage, and within the buffer zone to the saltmarsh / coastal bank. We believe we've met all of the performance standards for work within these resource areas, and the project will be designed in accordance with the stormwater standards. Some of the mitigation measures that are proposed, in addition to improving the water quality within the receiving water bodies, are some resource area enhancement plantings that will be done down gradient of the sand filter itself. I'm going to let Michelle field any questions you all have about the actual design, but I'll turn it back over to the commission for questions.
Agent Kelly, questions, comments from you?
Can you just explain how the sand filter works,
Sure. Can I go ahead and share my screen?
please?
Mike,
All right, let's see if this works. That's my email. Okay, and we'll get to the drainage area map. Are you all seeing a drainage area map on
Yes.
your screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Excellent. All right, so this is just showing, this was submitted as part of our stormwater report, and it's showing the total contributing area to the stormwater flow that comes out at the outfall pipe here at Riverview Park.
Yep.
And the dry swale that Amy was referring to is back up at this intersection with Buttonwood Lane. And then the sand filter will be down here in the park. And Agent Kelly's question was, how does the sand filter work? We are proposing to put a diversion structure in the outfall pipe pretty close to my cursor here. And this will act to divert small flows from small storm events over into the sand filter, while allowing flows from larger events to bypass the sand filter and continue out the outfall pipe. In this way, we can treat and remove some of the pollutants from those smaller storms where you expect to wash most of the nutrients, bacteria, sediment off the streets in those smaller storm events. So those are the ones we're really targeting with our retrofit here. So the water will flow into the sand filter. It will flow through a sediment forebay that is a hardened forebay so that it's easier to maintain and clean, and then into the sand filter itself. The sand filter works by filtering the runoff through a sand media, but also it's planted with native species so that those can take up some of the nutrients in the runoff as well. And I believe that's everything. Let me show you the plans as well. This is the existing conditions and showing some of the demo and erosion control efforts that will be needed. And here is the sand filter itself. We also are proposing to restore some of the buffer between the sand filter and the resources, so that to the eye, we want it to visually be a continuous feature of native plants. So you won't really be able to tell too much difference between the sand filter itself and the vegetated buffer, so that aesthetically it flows really well.
Nice, and we're all fans of native plants on this commission.
Excellent, so are we. Here's just kind of a zoom in of the plants in this area, so you can see that we're planting this this section between the sand filter and the salt marsh here. And right now, I believe I have a picture open. This is what it looks like out there with the edge of the wetlands here, and our sand filter would be up here. So this whole area would be replanted with native plants.
Okay.
And how often does the sand filter itself need to be cleaned or recharged?
Good question. The sand filter itself, being the media and the plants, should not need to be maintained in a significant way, except if we had a large storm where you had overtopping from the river itself. Then of course this area would be impacted and need to be addressed. For the most part, the maintenance will need to take place in the forebay area here. This is where your sediments and your trash are going to settle out. And if this is maintained on a regular basis, probably 2 to 4 times a year, then you'll have little impact in the filter itself. If for some reason the sediments do get into the filter, they can be cleaned out and maybe in 20 years or so, the surface of the sand filter might be clogged to the point where it would need to be refurbished. But it would not need very frequent maintenance. The plants themselves can be let to grow to their mature height, or they could be cut back a couple times a year, depending on the needs of the area.
Merrily or Joe Correa, do we know if the town is prepared to handle this 2 or 3 or 4 time a year maintenance in that area that Ms. West just mentioned?
I think the DPW will handle that.
Okay.
That's my guess.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, Joe Correa from the Board of Health. The one question that I would ask, and I think that it's covered, is the Board of Health in general does not want to see any kind of ponds or filters, in this case, hold or maintain any water for any long time. At this, again, we've been dealing with mosquito issues along with COVID. And we just do not want to exacerbate any potential problems. We've done this across the board with any subdivisions. This is not exactly what I think would hold water, but I just got to ask the question since I'm here.
Absolutely. Yes, this is a filter versus a retention pond. So it's intended for the water to flow down into the system and not be ponded on top. That being said, of course, during and soon after a storm, you would see water in this area. But it should be dissipated by 24 to 48 hours after an event. If it's not at that point, that is a good clue that some maintenance of the filter itself is needed. But again, we wouldn't expect that for many years after it's built. So this should not be a pond where you would see surface water being held by the filter. And the plants, of course, even when there is water in it, the plants, if they're allowed to grow to their mature height, you wouldn't actually see that water. And it should support some of the habitat, provide habitat for some of the animals and frogs and whatnot that would eat mosquito larvae as well.
Excellent. Yeah. I just one other quick question. Just how far above the groundwater there, or the high tide mark is the bottom of the filter?
The bottom of the filter is just over 2 feet above that, what we identified as a seasonal high groundwater mark. In terms of the mean high, let's see where that is located. I
think that's about elevation 4, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. It is close to the elevation of that seasonal or of mean high.
All right, thank you.
Good questions, Mr. Correa. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
So Merrily, any other comments for the Horsley Witten Group team?
Yes.
How about the swale? Is that going on the sidewalk or the street?
Let me scroll up to that. So the swale, let's see if I can scroll over here. I don't know if you can see this. It is off the road, to your question. It is in the right of way alongside of the road. It's in an area that is currently, let's see if I can, all my videos are in the way. There we go. It is in this kind of open right of way area along the road. Is where that's being proposed.
Can I speak while you have that picture up, please? I'm an abutting neighbor right in this area.
Sir, for the record, would you identify yourself, please?
Sure, my name is Paul Santos, and I live right on Guillot Street, and I was one of the abutters, so I got a notice of the abutter notification letter. So we have a lot of issues when it rains, obviously. The reason why I want you to keep this picture up is because if you look to the right of the picture, you're going to see a property that has, yep, right there. So they built this wall, which we contacted the town over 10 years ago, and no one did anything. This wall goes right to the street level. So as you can see, the house in front of it has kind of a sidewalk, and that's where that car is parked. There is no sidewalk per se on this street, but you can see on the opposite side in front of the post, the other neighbor has the truck there. That's also kind of a sidewalk per se. Exactly. So that wall right there, that's a huge, huge issue with drainage in this street. Before that wall was built, the grade would slope into the street level before they built this wall, actually. And if you go on Google Earth, which if you want me to bring it up, I can show you folks through my phone. So that's a huge drainage problem that's not being taken care of right there. When it snows as it is outside now, the plows don't even know where the street level is versus where that wall is. It's a huge concern. My other concern would be at the very end of Guillot Street, heading towards the river. They built a beautiful new walkway, which is very nice. However, when it rains a lot, that whole area is flooded. So they put a, probably 6-inch PVC round pipe underneath the tar. I don't know where the drainage goes to, but it doesn't work. There's a huge flood. So next time it rains a lot, somebody from the town can drive down there and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I drive an SUV and I don't even go down on that way because it's very high and I just go up Guillot into Nye Street. So just, I wanted to actually see a picture of that dry swale to get it. I know you showed a black and white slide, which really doesn't really give a good example of what it's going to look like. So that's what I was hoping for during this meeting, that, like you did, your live pictures like it is now, it's more of a 3D image for the eye to know exactly what we're going to see. So just to say it's a dry swale, I mean, I tried Googling dry swale and seeing pictures of it, but there's different ones. So it's kind of hard to know what's going to go there. But like I said, that property, 28 Guillot, that's a huge problem with that wall. And the town never did anything about it. It causes huge drainage issues for the neighbors around it. Their land is elevated almost to six feet. I'm going to show you a picture. That way you can see. 1 second, please. Sorry, I've been in the town for 20 years and I never joined a meeting, so I'm a little nervous.
It's okay.
Welcome.
You're right. You bring up good points for your neighbors.
So you folks can see the camera, right? I can't see my own camera, but can you guys see the picture?
Yes.
Okay, so see how it's snowing and that wall is right there? So that's a huge problem for the plows. That one, and then the drainage. When it's raining a lot, that water just boils over. Their land is, that's a 6-foot fence, that their dirt is all, this is what that property looks like on the side. So it's kind of bad. There's drainage issues to the neighbors, which is not fair. When they, this is how it used to slope right into the street level right there. There was no barrier. And then they built that huge barrier and it goes all the way up and then up here on the side as well. So when the kids were here from Buzzards Bay, I actually told them about it. They said they would note it down, but I guess nothing was done with that. But that's Cambridge. That looks nice.
Ms. West, would you like to talk about how your dry swale might help with some of that drainage?
It's not going to help with those posts against the street level.
Right, but it might be helping to draw away some of that water away from that low stone wall.
Right, but that's on the other side of the street, not on this side of the street.
So our retrofit design was meant to intercept the runoff as it's coming from further uphill without redoing the road itself or changing any grades. So we are treating a large part of the drainage area from upstream in the dry swale where we have it located. It does not change one way or another from impacts from the wall that the abutter is referencing.
So that's the two drains right there. This one against the wall, which the dry swale is not going to do anything there. It's going to go here. So.
Right, there's a catch basin in the street here where my cursor is, and that's where once the water will be treated in the dry swale, and any flows that are greater than around the 1-inch storm or so will be directed back into the drainage network here through this curb here. But there was no space to do anything on the other side of the street.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's because that's on the street level. There's no sidewalk, which technically 6 to 8 feet, somebody can correct me, is from the street to where a property begins. 6 to 8 feet from the street level.
As part of the town right away?
Yes.
It depends.
Yeah, I was asking somebody from the town, but nobody.
Okay.
Sounds like a DPW issue.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, it's just a huge problem, and I wish the town would look into that. Like I said, it just stinks to have that damage other people's property. It's not fair, and especially when you take really good care of yours, and an issue that has been brought to the town's attention, and it's going to take somebody to get hurt or a truck to come by when it's a blizzard and just yank the hell out of those timbers because they won't see it. It's at street level. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my concerns. I really appreciate that you folks allowed me to be here with you.
I did want to show you this picture here. It's a little different than the one we're proposing for our site, but it gives you some sense of what a swale looks like. It's not very deep because it really depends on this media, a sandy soil basically that will help to filter the runoff. So it's dug out, the area is dug out, but then it's replaced with this soil media, and then native plants, usually mostly grasses, will be put back in place. Of course, this example shows a sidewalk, and as you pointed out, there's no sidewalk in this area, so that part is not very accurate. But in general, this is what it might look like.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Mr. Santos, so what you won't see as the title there says hard edge bioretention, you won't see a hard edge there.
Exactly, yep, figured that. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. But thank you for participating tonight, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Roche, I appreciate. Thank you for allowing the residents to be part of it.
Oh, we're all supposed to participate. So this is, but thank you, the Horsley Witten team, for answering the questions, and also for taking the recommendations of the National History Project and trying to deal with mitigating the pollutant part of the runoff. As I emailed my commission members Saturday afternoon, after we had done a site visit down there on Saturday, bird nerd that I am, I stuck around with my binoculars and my field guide, and along with the usual suspects of Canada geese and mallards, there were hooded merganser, common goldeneye, and then I noticed birds that I did not recognize, and there was a pair of American widgeon and a Eurasian widgeon there. Those are first timers for me. But if these species are already there, and now we're about to take more pollutants out of the water, it's really going to amplify and improve the water quality there, and it'll keep these interesting species coming back. You know, it might even add to a little more biodiversity in that part of the river, which is still getting freshwater input and saltwater input. So it's, you know, it's an interesting habitat, and now we've got a chance to make it a little better. So this is a good project. Now that I'm done talking, I will ask commission members, do you have questions or comments for the Horsley Witten team?
Yeah, question, Mr. Chairman. Any trees being proposed, any trees going to be touched, or all trees will be untouched in that, near that outfall area over there in the park?
Good question.
Good question. It was tricky. There are a lot of trees in this area. We had, in fact, originally been proposing to have the sand filter on the other side of the outfall, and given the recent work being done out there and all the trees that have been saved in that area, it was getting a little too tight. So we shifted directions and went further to the north. There is, I believe, a couple of river birches that may be impacted, but we believe they can be saved and carefully removed and replaced at the end of the work. And I understand that
Okay.
these are important river birches. So even extra care will be taken in this area.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then to add to that, we are proposing a number of trees within the planting plan, some river birches and I believe some oaks around the edge of the sand filter.
Oh, great. Great. Thank you.
You don't see any issue with root intrusion into the work that you're going to do?
There is this one tree that we have identified with tree protection that it's possible some of the roots would be damaged during the digging because we need to get a pipe to take the water from the outfall pipe over in this direction.
Sand filter, yeah.
But we are hoping that it would impact just a small amount on one side of the tree, not enough to cause damage to this large tree.
Thank you, Rick. Other members of the commission?
Yeah. How long does it take to construct the sand filter?
Well, of course, that's a tricky question to answer depending on the weather and the season when we can get started with this project. Just that actually reminds me, I wanted to point out we're working with the Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program, of course, but they had secured a grant through the EPA to fund this work, taking these 3 projects in 3 different towns through to 100% design, but it does not include construction funds. So at this time, the goal would be to get those design plans ready, and then Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program will help the town look for funding then to build it. So in terms of what time of year this will get built, I can't answer that at this point. But this type of work, because there's no structures in the way and there's really not any clearing, should not take that long to build. And if conditions are right, I mean, they've got to put a diversion structure here and do the excavating and planting. I'd say perhaps around 2 months. But of course, that's assuming everything goes right and the weather is good.
Okay, so I see in the plans for erosion and sediment control, silt socks. Currently right now there's just on site, I don't know, have you seen the erosion control that's in place along that?
Yes.
All right, well, that erosion control that's there isn't working at all, and it seems to be running into the river. I was just, my only real concern, what I would like to see would be during the excavation, there'd be maybe a turbidity curtain deployed into the river along the edge, and then possibly the curtain deployed so that the sediment doesn't go into the river or anything that does erode. Either that or proper erosion control maintained, because what's there is it hasn't been maintained and it's doesn't appear to be working. That's really all I got with that. That's why I was concerned with how long it was going to take, and I think a turbidity curtain deployed for two months wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Okay. I do want to point out that what is out there right now is, I think it's a silt fence, and it was placed right on the edge of the wetland itself, and we would be proposing the silt sock at the top of the slope to really protect from the digging for the sand filter. There will be plantings done between that and where the silt fence is now, but not a wholesale digging or exposing of the soil in that area. So that will help, but we can certainly consider a turbidity curtain as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the commission? other neighbors or abutters with questions or comments? All right, Michelle, if you would stop sharing screen, thank you. So I'm not seeing any other discussion. Marilee, any last comments before I ask for a motion on this?
No, I think it's a good project.
Ditto. Okay, I will entertain a motion to issue a positive order of conditions with the strong recommendation that a turbidity curtain be considered. So I'll entertain that motion.
Make that motion.
Motion from Ryan. Do we have a second?
Second.
That's from Everett. Any further discussion by the commission? Okay, going across my screen, and Ryan, I'm guessing it's going to be a yes from you.
Yes.
Everett?
Yes.
Heidi?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Santos, again, thank you for your questions.
Have a good night.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, next will be on the agenda. That's it for the hearing part of things. Discussion wetlands bylaw. Our subcommittee chair is not on the meeting, so we'll jump over that. Agent Kelly, any updates regarding hunting on conservation land? Any town board's comment to you about this?
No, I haven't heard a word about it. I'll ask again, but I haven't had any comments at all. So I'll throw it out there again and see if we can get some response.
I looked out my bedroom window yesterday. There was 6 deer in my yard.
Oh,
Wow.
man.
Like between my yard and my neighbor's yard, back and forth, eating his arborvitae. You know, these things are going to look like lollipops by the time they're done. Everett, question, comment?
Comment. After the information was sent out over the internet about deer population, especially in this zone, allowing deer hunting during the proper season is like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And it is a public health issue, and the Board of Health should get on board with us. And I think the town should allow hunting on our conservation property.
Well, I think they already do. They just need to make it clear that it's allowed. And like I commented to Ryan in response to the article he sent, because Mass Audubon helped with this story, and they're going to push for hunting on their property. Maybe they'll give a nudge to allow for hunting on Sundays too during the season. Because this part of the state, because it's so dense, it's definitely going to have a problem. Everett.
I still have a problem with Sunday hunting because there's a lot of recreational users in state forests and parks on Sundays.
Good point.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but that's a mass legislator thing that has nothing to do with mass wildlife or it's been dragged. Yeah, or conservation commission that's been dragged through the legislator for years, and it's gets bumped for other reasons this year, COVID and every other reason. But no, I agree. But another note. Mass Wildlife is raising prices on tags and licenses and fishing licenses and everything else. They're proposing. They're having 3 meetings to talk about it. But I think allowing hunting on Sundays would probably sweeten the deal for everybody that pays for all those tags and licenses and everything. And but then again, it has nothing to do with Mass Wildlife. That's a mass legislator thing. And
I would worry about raising fees. If anything, it would just discourage people, or so it would seem.
Oh, it's priceless.
Good thing you feel that way. Next item is agent updates. Marilee, anything from you?
I've been spending my time doing mapping for the EPA for the stormwater stuff, and PJ Keating. Not a lot of construction inspections or anything. but it, you know, from what I can tell, everybody's doing what they said they were gonna do. So, you know, as long as the weather holds out, which I guess it's not, but you know, there's houses that are going up pretty quick, and the solar farms are clearing and getting ready to put up all their panels. So, you know, that's what's going on in town.
A question for you regarding a project like we just heard about at the bottom of Diot Street. When it's going to be necessary for the DPW to periodically, say 2 or 3 times a year, clean out an area, how do we end up getting on their schedule? Is this something that you as the agent would ask for? How does that happen?
Yeah, I could go over and talk to Dan. He's pretty amenable to adding things to his list.
Okay. Yeah, because a project like that's a good one, but it's only as effective as keeping it cleared, clean to do its functions.
Right, but they'll be the ones that are installing it, so so they'll have some ownership there.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, it's just a matter of hopefully EPA and the NEP will help with the funds for that.
Yeah.
Anybody else with business for the commission? Sounds like Marilee's.
Nope. No.
Little update.
No, Marilee sounds busy. If you need help, Marilee, reaching out to the Board of Health and the town administrator and or the selectmen, I'll volunteer to help you by contacting them.
Great.
Sure. On the hunting matter.
Keep that in mind.
On the hunting matter.
Yeah.
Good to get these things resolved before our agenda starts getting busier again. Okay. Our next meeting is to be held Tuesday, February 9th. Hearing no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sure.
Thank you, Rick. We have a second. Thank you, Everett. All in favor, give us a wave.
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 9 minutes past 7.